Hi everyone and welcome back to OC Avery. Now in today's video we're going to be talking about two different things. The first being DNA sex in Redpolls. I've had my DNA results come back from the lab just this week. I mentioned in last week's video about DNA sex in them. I've got the results, so we're going to take a look at what the results look like for the birds that we've bred and the new birds that we've brought in. And once that's done and we know our definite cocks and hens, then I'm going to be taking the birds, putting them into show cages and choosing the birds for this year's show season, which I'll be separating out and preparing for the shows differently to how I'll leave the rest of the breeding birds and the separate birds, treating them slightly differently throughout the show season, whether they are or are not going to a show. So we'll get right into it. So when we start talking about the DNA section, I want to start by asking you a question. Do you ever struggle to sex your birds? Now the answer to that is probably yes. If you breed redpolls, if you breed canaries, if you breed Bengalese finches, if you breed maybe cockatiels, if you breed an awful lot of birds aren't easy to sex. They're not visually dimorphic and you can't tell the sexes apart as easy, especially with some of the young birds like I'm doing with the redpolls. So what I've found and I've contacted is a company called Avigenics, and it's a UK-based DNA sexing company. I found them online a few months ago and there was an article in the Cage and Avery about Avigenics, and I thought, with the opportunity of being able to actually use a UK-based company, because I know that some people struggle to send their samples across, overseas because of Brexit and certain restrictions. It's just meant that having a UK-based company makes it an awful lot easier for us, at least at the moment. So what I've done is I've used Avigenics, and they were actually at Stafford as well. Had a chat with them about their DNA sexing, and that's where I've got my redpolls done this year. So it's quite a simple process. All you have to do is there's three different methods. You can either use feather, blood or eggshell. Now eggshell this time of year isn't really that useful, and I would say at least if you're a bird breeding in terms of like canaries and stuff, you're probably not going to want to use eggshell. The reason being is that it's just not ideal. As you can know, maybe I've got, 2 cocks and 3 hens in a nest, but you don't know which one's hatched from which egg. Perhaps it'd be better for something like peacocks or game birds, whether you're hatching something specifically in a controlled environment rather than in a breeding environment like this. Now, what I've done is I chose to go through feather, and the reason being is it's just much easier to sort of sample. You can go through blood, and usually going through blood you would involve you clipping the toenails of the birds carefully, very carefully, getting some blood on a sample or whatever they need it on, and then sending that off. But there is risk of, obviously, you don't want to go too far and damage the bird. So I just took feather, and all that meant is that I had to pluck a few feathers from the bird. It doesn't matter really what type of feather it is. I chose breast feathers on the chest just because it was easier and from on the underside, rather than pulling out flights or pulling out tail feathers, and obviously the chest feathers and the body feathers will grow back quite readily. So I chose feather, and we plucked all the redpolls that needed sexing. So we had birds in here, we had birds down here, and we had the cobalts, which are in the other shed we brought back from Stafford. So we took 12 samples, and that was a few feathers from each bird, put them in a Ziploc bag and sent them off to Avigenics, and that was last Thursday. Come through to this Wednesday and the samples have already come back, already been paid for, all sorted like that, and I've got my results. So a really quite a fast process. It took them 6 days, and I don't think you can beat that almost. So that was then getting the birds sexed, and I've got the results. So just a quick process, if you're interested in how DNA sexing works, is that the DNA is in the nucleus of the cell of any organism. So the DNA has been taken out of that. It's been extracted from the cells, extracted from the sample, which in my case is feather, and then has been examined in the lab, and I believe they probably used PCR and tried to increase the amount of samples and amplify the number, and then have a look at the chromosomes. And now in birds at least they have 2 different chromosomes which determine sex. If a bird has a Z and a Z chromosome, then it's a male, and if a bird has a Z and a W chromosome, it's female. So it's just a case of looking at that, and then when put into some mechanism of sort of lab analysis, it comes up. If it's a male, it's got one bar, which is just 2 Z chromosomes, and I think it's probably based on density. And then if it's a female, it has 2 lines come up, and you have the Z and the Y. So it's the Z and the W. So that's how we sex the birds, in a lab sort of station. That's a very basic overview. Now, we've got the results back, so I'll quickly take you through them now. So we had some quite good numbers actually. From the 10 unsexed birds that I bred this year, we had 2 definite hens because how they were bred with the mutation, but we had 10 unsexed birds which I had kept back, and of those 10, 5 were cocks and 5 were hens, which is a great result. And the 2 new cobalts we've brought in are both DNA sexed back as hens. So I've separated them out. We've got the cocks in here and the hens down here, and we've got the other 2 hens still finishing off the quarantine. Now, with our cock birds, we've got 2 normals, we've got 2 cinnamons and a cobalt, and with our hens, we've got 2 or 3 cinnamons, we've got 2 normals, a cobalt, and something else. There's 5 hens in there and 5 up here, so that's great, and I'm really pleased with those results. It's good odds, it's good ratios, because you don't want too much of one and none of the other. We wouldn't have been annoyed if we'd have ended up with maybe 2 cocks and 8 hens, but I think 5-5 is pretty good, to be fair. Now, what Avigenics do is also provide some DNA sexing certificates just as proof. So I've printed them off, and forgive my printer for not being the best, but you get a certificate, and obviously just draw the line there, and that's one, that's another, and we've got them all here. So I'm going to have to get these printed again, cut out properly. I'm going to laminate them, and then if any of these birds come up for sale, you'll get the DNA sexing certificate to prove that it's a cock or hen. Now, it is mainly, I would say it's 95% accurate. I imagine that. I know there are some cases, some breeders of DNA sex birds, and not only just redpolls, and they have come back wrong. So because of that, and I just wanted to make sure everything was good, I sent 2 test samples of birds that I was definite were cock birds, which we've bred. And there are actually 2 normals in here. They got quite red feathers on the chest from which I'd plucked, so I'm pretty damn sure they were cock birds, and the results were correct. They were cock birds. So just giving myself confidence on that, and hopefully you as well. So Avigenics just sent me these as a PDF, and I've printed them off, and I've got my results. You get blue for the cocks and pink for the hens, so it's perfect. Very easy and a very simple method to use. So that's my DNA sexing. 10 of my unsexed birds and 2 more, and it's worked out quite well. So that's the DNA sexing covered, and I just wanted to show you guys, and hopefully it's a service that you'll be able to use. I found it really well, really good. Quite an easy website, and quite easy to track through, and easy to contact as well. So really good service by Avigenics, and I definitely recommend them if you are wanting to get your birds DNA sexed. So part of the idea of me getting them DNA sexed was, one, so I know what I've got for next year, so I don't want to be keeping on a load of cocks and no hens, and I don't want to be doing the vice versa, but also for the shows. Now, at least with current year birds, it probably doesn't matter as much if you accidentally put a current year cock, redpoll in a current year hen class. It's because they aren't easily distinguishable anyway. But it just means it's going to help me when it comes to the shows as well. So what we're going to be doing now is taking the different classes of birds out. I've actually got my schedule for the I think it's the Lancashire, yes, the Lancashire British Bird and Hybrid Club, and we're going to look through that show schedule and have a look at the classes. I've got an idea anyway of the classes. We've got 10 number 2 show gauges to fill, so we're probably going to look to fill 8 to 9 of those and have a spare one back, and we'll just choose the best birds which will hit each class, so we hit as many classes as possible and hopefully have the best chance of winning some awards. Now, the first class that we're trying to hit is the flighted cockbirds. When we look, I'm just going to use the Lancashire British Bird and Hybrid Club schedule for this. So these birds go underneath the, let me just try and find it for you, the common redpoll class, cockbird, and obviously I'm a novice, so it'll be in one of the novice classes. So the common redpoll is the lesser, and you've just got to look at the birds themselves there and understand that that is the normal class. So this is for the normal mutation birds, and then what I'm going to use is the British Bird Council Members Handbook, and what that's going to show you there, and it is the 2020 edition, there's not a 2021 edition as far as I'm aware, is the exhibition standards for British birds. And what I need to do is use this to tell me the more information on what I'm trying to show. So the size is as large as possible within the natural limits of the species. The type, nicely rounded, full head with a good width, short cobby body, thick set body, set well across the perch. Warm, richy nut brown throughout with plentiful, well-defined flank workings, reasonably well-defined bib, crimson poll, devoid of too large, split white on the chest when colour-fed to show rich pink flushes on the breast and rump. We're not going to bother about hens just at the moment. The faults can be colour impurities, tend towards black, greyish, brown or mealy colour, lack of working, eye defects, poor presentation, etc. And there's multiple different points which you can get from that. So looking at these birds then, these are the 4 flighted cock birds. They're all been colour fed. Now let's have a look at the colours. So the first one I can tell you is that this bird here, I'm going to call it, this is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Number 2 is definitely a buff bird, and just not took the red as well as it being not well marked and almost sort of a dilute colour. So it's not brilliant. So we're going to be moving this to the back of the line. This bird will not be going to the show. Now you might notice here is that these are well painted show cages. If you've seen on Facebook, I got all of my 24 show cages out last week, and we cleaned them all down, and I decided to paint all 24, so they're all looking brand new. Now then I'll have a look on this bird. Now this is the normal split Feo. Nothing wrong with it, however the markings aren't brilliant. We've got the normal here with the white flight. Now that's going to be classed as a fault because of the discoloration in the flight and in the tail feathers. So we're going to move that bird across. So I can tell you now that this bird won't be going to the show either, so it's between these two. Now we're just going to have to look back at the standard, is that you want a well marked bird, typey, cobby, etc. like that. This bird, although the markings are alright, it's just not quite there, and it's got the white uprise through the chest. So in that case, this is the bird that we're going to take to the shows. As you can see, much better shape. It's a buff bird, but the colour is alright on it. It fits the class better, and I think that's going to be a better bird. The markings are well on the flanks. So this is the normal flighted cock bird that we're going to take to the shows. So next up, we've got the next flighted class. So this is flighted cock birds in colour variants. Now, on the Lancashire British Bird Young Hybrid Club schedule, it does have classes for Cinnamon, Cobalt, Agate and Isabel. However, some shows have them as just colour variants. So you'll have an Isabel competing with a Cobalt, competing with a Cinnamon, competing with a Pie, for example. So what I'm looking to do is, rather than hitting each class with the colour variant ones, I just want to choose the best bird or best 2 birds. Now, we've ruled out a few episodes ago that this bird won't be staying and it won't be going to a show. As you can see, it keeps putting its head back in the cage, and that's not something we want to see from a redpoll. So that bird's eliminated from from the competition. So it's between these two. Now, automatically I can see that the better bird here is the Isabel. It's got a much better shape, it's more cobby, and it's got some good markings. The Cobalt, it's not as dark as it could be doing. It's got the white extending through the chest. So it is actually going to be the Isabel that takes the colour variants. And here he's took the red colour quite well, both on the poll, on the cap on his head and the chest. So I am quite pleased with it. It's got the cobbiness, and it has got the faint markings which you expect to see on an Isabel. So that's going to be the colour variant that we're going to take to the shows, the colour variant flighted cock that we're going to take to the shows this year. So the next class that we need to assess is the flighted colour variant hens. Now, as it goes for colour variant hens, we haven't got any normal hens, so I can't be taking any of those to the show. But what we've got is these these colour variant hens, and what we're going to have is two of these 4 hens. Now, I know which two it's going to be just because of first glances and looks. So what we have here is we've got 2 sort of cinnamons. We've actually got a completely normal cinnamon, and this is the daughter to that one at the World Show. Sorry, 1 second at the World Show, and we've actually got a cinnamon cobalt here from the same sort of bloodline. A cinnamon cobalt really isn't going to do much in a show because it would have to probably go in the, well, it should probably go in the cobalt class because it is a variant of cobalt, and it's just not what I'm looking to take to a show. So the cinnamon that's going to be the obvious choice here is going to be this bird. That's the better bird. The markings are good on the flanks. It's got some good shape to it, and we're going to add some more shape to it, and I'm going to tell you how in the next episode. But then when we look at our cobalts, we've got cobalt I bred 2 years ago, cobalt hen we bred off this year, and we've got the cobalt hen that we brought in from Stafford. It's a flighted bird from Rob Evans. Now, a clear difference in this is that although these birds do need show training more, they need development and so forth, this bird, I think you would arguably say from a better line because he's the one that won the World Show, but it's a distant relative of those. And then we have this one. Now, this bird I'd say is better because it's darker, it's got better markings, the white doesn't really extend up through the belly of the bird, and I'd just say it's a bit of a bigger bird as well, and I think that's definitely the better bird. She's not great, she's not steady, and she is quite small. So the 2 birds that we're going to be having for the colour variant classes of the Redpolls, flighted colour variant hens, is going to be the cinnamon and this cobalt. So that's our flighted classes sorted. We've got our normal cock, we've got a colour variant cock, and we've got 2 colour variant hens. So that's 4 birds for the flighted classes, and it'll probably cover us at least three classes with normal cock, colour variant hens, but it could cover us even more than that. It could cover us up to 4 different classes, which is great. Now we're going to have to look at the current year birds, and obviously part of the reason that we did the DNAs on them was to sex them so we know what's a cock and what's a hen, so it can hit those classes. So we'll now take a look at the normal cocks that will be competing for a place on the show team this year. So these are the 2 current year normals. The sort of standard stays the same for these guys. Something I can tell you right now is that these are going to need some good showcase training because they're both on the front, and we don't like to see that. I'd rather them be on the perches, better for the judge to assess them on. Now, obviously we've DNA'd these, they're both cockbirds, and these are the 2 I sent off as sort of control experiments. I knew they were both cocks pretty much anyway because they've got a few good red feathers when we colour fed them. So taking a look right now, I would say that the better bird is on the right hand side. If we can just get this left hand side bird down, the markings just aren't as well defined on this bird compared to the other, and this is a much better excuse me, better colour. And I think this is probably the better bird. It's got a bit better shape to it, especially when it's sat on the perches, which I wish it would do for me to show you. But it just seems the better bird of the 2. And this bird's not shown itself at all, which is, a red flag, absolutely. In that we need to get them to stop doing this on the front. So this is the current year bird that we're going to take to the shows. These are the 2 colour varying current year bird cocks we're going to be taking. We've got one of the 2. So on the left we've got well, they're actually both brothers, but I'd say on the left we've got a bird that's got a sort of a yellow cap, a yellow poll, and the bird on the right has got a red one. And yeah, mainly I'd just say that's probably through diet. Maybe the bird on the right has had a bit more colour food and it's just made them go red or something like that. It's difficult to assess the quality right now just because this is the first time in the showcase. However, I would say that the best bird is looking like the bird on the right. He will settle down a bit more, be a bit more steady across the perches, but the markings are good on the flanks of the bird. It looks a bigger bird as well, better shaped compared to the bird on the left. It is steadier, but it's a bit more streamlined, not as much to it. And I just think that would probably let it down in the show, as well as the fact that it's got a yellow cap. So the bird which we're going to be taking to the show separated out is going to be the bird on the right, the colour variant cinnamon redpoll current year bird. So here we've got our 2 current year normal hens that we've had DNA sexed. Obviously, again, not much competition between the two in terms of it's a class of 2 for me at home. With these birds, we've got 2 to choose from, so not an awfully hard thing to choose from, you know. So something I've just noticed on the bird on the right, perhaps you've noticed it, is it's just started twirling its head, and that's the last thing we want for a show bird. They are both against the front, so they do need to work on that. So I'm trying to move them down, but I would say the bird on the right is the better bird again, better marked, better shape, better colour. The bird on the left's fine, but it's a bit more washed out. The white extends up to almost the throat, not much of a bid present either, so it's going to have to be the bird on the right. And then the final class for the redpolls is the colour variant current year bird hen class. Now in this class we're going to have 2 birds to hit it, and we're going to treat it as well is that in some shows, for example the Lancashire, it does say in the schedule that there is a class for cobalts and a class for cinnamons. You know, the colour variants are divided to the more common colour variants. So the idea is that with these birds we're going to choose 2 to hit both those classes, because they will be in separate classes. Now on the very right hand side we've got the new cobalt we had in from Rob, which is, again, it's a fantastic bird. The colour is brilliant. It's got a nice real crimson poll, you know, really crimson cap. The markings on the flanks are looking great, and it's overall just a really nice bird. So that's going to be making the show team for sure. And then we've got the choice between 2 cinnamons. Now the cinnamons are going to be an interesting one to figure out, in that I think there's positives and negatives to both of these birds, and ultimately it's still, I know which one's going to happen at the show too. It's the one in the centre. It's all on the right hand side, and the reason being is that it's got the pure cinnamon colour through it. The problem is, and the only problem is, that lets down the bird on the left is that it's got white flight feathers, and that's going to be marked down as a fault on the bird, which is not what we want. And if it's marked down as a fault, then it means that it's going to be something that can be criticised about the bird. Although it's got better shape and better markings, the white really does let it down, which is a real shame, because I do prefer the bird on the left, but it's just not going to work if it's got those white flight feathers. It is a shame, because I do think it's a lovely looking bird, but it's going to have to be the bird on the right for me, because it's got the better colour, really. You know, there's not the faults in the colour. Sure, it's a bit smaller, sure the shape just isn't quite right, but I think on the whole it probably does outweigh the fact that the genuine, you know, easily noticeable fault on the left hand bird is those white flights. So it's going to be the cinnamon on the right and the cobalt for our current year colour variant hens. So that's just part of our show team selected for this year with the redpolls. We've got 9 redpolls for this year's show season, and we've got 10 number 2 sized British bird show cages. So we're going to take a look around now at the birds. I've divided them all out and separated all the birds that will be going to the shows, and I've also chosen an extra bird to fill that 10th place in the show team for the number 2 size. So we'll take a look at now. Beginning with our flighted normal bird, as you can see, they're all in the separate own little cage, and the idea of having not far spaced apart perches is so that they're very similar to those of show cages. And what that means is that then we can get that bird almost training while it's in there. It's used to then jumping perch to perch like that. Next we have the flighted colour variant, which is the Isabel cock bird. We've got the the current year bird cinnamon cock, the current year normal cock, the current year normal hen, the current year cobalt hen, the flighted cinnamon hen, the flighted cobalt hen. We've got our over year cocks and hens in here with the 2 other hens, which are current years. We've got our cinnamon hen, current year bird. I've then chosen that the best bird to then fill that next place is a siskin hen who we bred last year, and she's obviously never had a run out to a show, and I think she deserves it with those markings. She looks a really good bird. So that is then our 10th bird in the number 2s of the smaller finches. And I have actually just chosen as well, just to hit the mule and hybrid class, we've got our golden mule hen, which will be in a smaller size 3 cage. That's our show team for the 2021/2022 show season. So I hope you've liked this video and you've enjoyed it and you've found some useful tips. The next video we're going to be just talking and primarily focusing on the feeding of these birds. We're going to give them a slightly different diet because they are show birds than for the rest of the birds that are just staying to overwinter here and then breed next year. Obviously won't be going to the shows. So we'll be doing a different video on that, and that's going to be a short video, so that'll be out probably next Tuesday evening, and we're going to just talk about the diet. And then next week we're going to be looking at some of the show team selection for the larger finches, which will be the green finches. We're going to look at the cocks, the hens of both flighted and current year bird categories. We won't be showing any colour variants because none of them are at the standard where I want to take them to a show, so it'll only be normals, but we're going to have a look at those next week, so make sure you subscribe for that so you don't miss it. And if you have enjoyed this video, smash the like button, hit subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next video.